The sun always seemed to shine a little brighter when I was a child. When I think back to those days, the memories feel like a warm blanket on a cold afternoon. Today, I want to tell you about one specific day that stays in my mind. It was not a holiday or a birthday. It was just a simple Saturday in the middle of summer. I remember waking up before anyone else in the house. The room was quiet and the air was cool. I could see small pieces of dust dancing in the sunlight that came through the window. I stayed in bed for a long time, just watching the light move across the floor. My bedroom was small, but it felt like a kingdom. It had blue wallpaper with small white clouds. I remember the sound of the birds outside my window. They were chirping loudly, as if they were talking to each other about the day ahead. I felt a deep sense of peace. There were no chores to do yet. There was no school. There were no worries about the future. There was only the present moment, and the present moment felt perfect. I finally decided to get out of bed. The wooden floor felt cool under my feet. I walked slowly to the kitchen, trying not to make any noise. I did not want to wake up my parents or my little sister. In the kitchen, I found my mother. She was already awake, standing by the stove. She was wearing her favorite green apron. The kitchen smelled like fresh coffee and toasted bread. My mother looked at me and smiled. She did not say much, but her smile told me everything. She poured a glass of cold orange juice for me. I sat at the wooden table and watched her move. She moved with such grace and kindness. My father came into the room a few minutes later. He looked tired but happy. He rubbed my hair and sat down next to me. He smelled like peppermint and old books. We ate breakfast together in silence. It was a comfortable silence. We had eggs, toast, and jam. I remember the taste of the strawberry jam. It was sweet and thick. My mother made it herself every summer. While we ate, my father talked about the garden. He wanted to plant new flowers near the fence. He talked about the soil and the rain. I listened to his voice, which was deep and steady. I did not understand everything about gardening, but I loved the way he talked about it. He cared for the plants the same way he cared for us. After breakfast, my mother asked me to help her with the laundry. We went outside to the backyard. The grass was still wet with morning dew. It felt soft and cold between my toes. We hung the white sheets on the long clothesline. The wind was blowing gently, and the sheets moved like ghosts in the air. I loved the smell of clean laundry drying in the sun. It was the smell of home. My mother told me stories about when she was a little girl. She told me about her own garden and the dog she used to have. Her voice was like a soft melody. I felt very lucky to be there with her, under the blue sky, doing such a simple task. When the laundry was finished, my father called me to the garage. He was fixing my old bicycle. The bicycle was bright red, but the paint was starting to peel. He was putting oil on the chain and checking the tires. He showed me how to use a wrench. He was very patient. He told me that it is important to take care of the things we love. I watched his hands. They were strong and covered in grease. I felt proud that he was teaching me. I felt like I was growing up. Once the bike was ready, he told me I could go for a ride. He told me to be careful and to come home before lunch. I felt a rush of excitement. I put on my shoes and grabbed my hat. The day was just beginning, and I felt like anything was possible. I rode my bicycle down the long, dusty road that led away from our house. The wind felt wonderful against my face. It pushed my hair back and cooled my skin. I could hear the sound of the tires on the gravel. It was a rhythmic sound, like a heartbeat. On both sides of the road, there were tall trees and fields of yellow grass. I felt very small in the big world, but I also felt very free. This was my favorite part of the day. I was the captain of my own ship, and my bicycle was taking me on a great adventure. I decided to go to the creek. The creek was a place where the neighborhood children often gathered. It was hidden behind a line of old oak trees. To get there, I had to ride past the Miller family's farm. The Millers were our neighbors. They had a large barn and many cows. As I rode past, I saw Mr. Miller working in the field. He waved his hand at me and shouted a friendly hello. I waved back and pedaled faster. I could see the cows standing under the shade of a large tree. They looked very peaceful. I wondered what they thought about all day. When I reached the trees near the creek, I parked my bicycle against a trunk. I walked the rest of the way. The air was different here. It was cooler and smelled like wet earth and green leaves. I could hear the water splashing over the rocks. It was a soft, musical sound. I saw my friend Leo sitting by the water. Leo lived 2 houses away from me. He was wearing a striped shirt and had a fishing pole in his hand. He looked very serious. I sat down next to him on a large, flat rock. We did not speak at first. We just watched the water. Leo told me that he had been there for an hour but had not caught any fish. He did not seem sad about it. He said that the best part of fishing was just sitting by the water. I understood what he meant. We watched a small blue dragonfly land on a reed. Its wings were like thin glass. We watched a family of ducks swim past us. The mother duck was leading the way, and the little ducks were following her in a straight line. They looked very organized and busy. We decided to look for treasures in the water. We took off our shoes and stepped into the creek. The water was very cold, and the bottom was sandy. We walked slowly, looking for interesting stones. I found a stone that was perfectly round and very smooth. It was a light gray color with a white stripe around the middle. To me, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. I put it in my pocket. Leo found a piece of green glass that had been smoothed by the water. It looked like an emerald. We felt like we were very rich. While we were exploring, we heard a loud noise in the bushes. We froze. For a moment, I thought it might be a wild animal, but then a small brown dog ran out. It was Barnaby, the dog that belonged to the old lady who lived at the end of the road. Barnaby was very friendly and very energetic. He jumped into the water and started splashing us. We laughed so hard that our stomachs hurt. Barnaby barked and ran in circles. The fear we felt a moment ago was gone. We spent the next hour playing with the dog and throwing sticks for him to chase. By the time the sun was high in the sky, I was starting to feel hungry. I remembered my father's instruction to be home by lunch. I said goodbye to Leo and Barnaby. I promised Leo that we would meet again the next day. I walked back to my bicycle and started the ride home. The ride back felt shorter. I was thinking about the smooth stone in my pocket and the cold water on my feet. I felt a deep sense of happiness. The world felt like a kind and beautiful place. As I approached my house, I could see the smoke coming from the chimney. I knew that lunch was waiting for me. When I arrived home, the house felt warm and welcoming. My mother had prepared a simple lunch of tomato soup and cheese sandwiches. The cheese was melted and the bread was crispy. We sat at the kitchen table again. My little sister, Sarah, was there too. She was 3 years younger than me. She was telling my mother about a butterfly she had seen in the garden. Her eyes were wide with excitement. She used her hands to show how the butterfly moved its wings. I sat there eating my soup and listening to her. I realized then that even the smallest things could be a big event when you are a child. After lunch, the sun was very hot. My mother told us that it was too hot to play outside for a while. She suggested that we take a rest. I went to the living room and lay down on the rug. The floor was cool. I picked up a book, but I did not read much. I just looked at the pictures. The house was very quiet. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock on the wall. My sister fell asleep on the sofa. I watched her breathe in and out. She looked so peaceful. I felt a sense of responsibility for her, even though I was only a few years older. Around 3 o'clock, the heat began to fade a little. My father came inside and asked if I wanted to help him in the garden. I jumped up immediately. I loved working with my father. We went outside to the patch of ground near the fence. He gave me a small shovel. He showed me how to dig a hole for the new flowers. The soil was dark and rich. It had a strong, earthy smell. We worked together for a long time. My father told me the names of the flowers. He told me which ones liked the sun and which ones preferred the shade. While we were working, our neighbor, Mrs. Gable, walked over to the fence. Mrs. Gable was a very old woman who lived alone. She always wore a large straw hat and carried a basket. She was very kind to us. She had a wonderful garden with many roses. She handed my father a bowl of fresh strawberries from her bushes. They were small and very red. My father thanked her, and we all shared the strawberries. They were the sweetest strawberries I had ever tasted. Mrs. Gable stayed for a while and talked about the weather and the birds. She seemed happy to have someone to talk to. I noticed that Mrs. Gable's hands were very wrinkled, but they were also very gentle. She touched the leaves of our new plants with great care. She told me that plants are like people. If you give them love and attention, they will grow strong and beautiful. I thought about that for a long time. I wanted to be like a plant that grew strong and beautiful. I wanted to make my parents proud. I continued to dig in the dirt, feeling the sun on my back. I felt a connection to the earth and to the people around me. Later that afternoon, my mother joined us in the garden. She brought out a pitcher of cold lemonade. We sat on the grass and drank the lemonade. It was sour and sweet at the same time. We talked about what we wanted to do in the evening. My father suggested that we go for a walk in the woods behind our house. My sister cheered and clapped her hands. She loved the woods. We finished our lemonade and went inside to wash our hands. My skin was a little red from the sun, and my fingernails were dirty from the soil, but I did not mind. I felt like I had accomplished something important. The feeling of that afternoon is hard to describe. It was a feeling of belonging. I knew exactly where I was supposed to be. I was with my family, in my garden, under the big sky. I did not want to be anywhere else. I looked at the flowers we had planted. They looked small and fragile in the big garden, but I knew they would grow. I promised myself that I would help my father water them every day. I wanted to see them bloom. I wanted to see the colors they would bring to our yard. As the sun began to set, the sky turned into a painting of pink, orange, and purple. We started our walk into the woods. The trees were tall and dark against the bright sky. The air was becoming cool again. We walked on a narrow path that was covered in dry leaves. The leaves made a crunching sound under our boots. My father led the way, holding my sister's hand. My mother and I walked behind them. Everything was very still. It felt like the forest was going to sleep. We reached a small clearing in the middle of the woods. There was a large fallen log where we often sat. We sat down together and looked up at the sky. The stars were starting to appear one by one. They looked like tiny diamonds scattered on a dark blue cloth. My father pointed to a group of stars and told us its name. He knew a lot about the stars. He told us that people had been looking at the same stars for thousands of years. It made me feel very small, but also very connected to history. My mother started to sing a soft song. It was a song she used to sing to us when we were very young. Her voice was low and beautiful. It seemed to blend with the sounds of the night. I leaned my head against her shoulder and closed my eyes. I felt completely safe. I thought about the day I had just lived. I thought about the morning light, the ride on my bicycle, the cold water of the creek, the smooth stone in my pocket, and the strawberries from Mrs. Gable. I realized that it was a perfect day. We walked back to the house in the dark. My father carried a flashlight, and the beam of light danced on the path in front of us. When we got home, the house felt different. It felt cozy and warm. My mother made us some hot cocoa. We sat in the living room and talked for a little while longer. My sister was already half asleep. My father carried her to bed. I stayed up for a few more minutes, looking out the window at the moon. The moon was a bright silver crescent. I went to my room and changed into my pajamas. I pulled the stone out of my pocket and put it on my nightstand. It was a reminder of my adventure. I climbed into bed and pulled the covers up to my chin. The sheets were still warm from the sun that had shone on them earlier in the day. I could still smell the fresh air on them. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for my life. I was thankful for my parents, my sister, my friend Leo, and even the old dog Barnaby. As I lay there in the dark, I thought about what it means to be happy. I realized that happiness is not about big things or expensive things. It is about the small moments. It is about the smell of breakfast, the feeling of the wind on your face, and the kindness of a neighbor. It is about being with the people you love. I felt a sense of calm that I can still remember today. It was the kind of peace that only a child can truly feel, because a child lives entirely in the now. I slowly drifted off to sleep, listening to the quiet sounds of the house. I heard the wind blowing through the trees outside. I heard the distant bark of a dog. I felt like the world was holding me gently. That Saturday was just one day among many, but it became a treasure in my heart. When I grow old and look back at my life, I will always remember that day. I will remember the light, the smells, and the love. And in my mind, the sun will always be shining on that red bicycle and the garden by the fence. I hope that you enjoyed this story. If you look back at your own childhood, I am sure you can find a day like this, a day that was simple but special, a day that taught you something about the world or about yourself. These memories are like stars in our own personal sky. They guide us and give us light when things feel dark. Thank you for listening to my memory. It was a joy to share it with you. Sleep well, and may your dreams be as bright as a summer morning.